Now that the basic framework for our site is built out, we could go ahead and start looking at how to change the templates dynamically based on what's being loaded. And the key to that is the loop. So let's go ahead and add the loop, which we talked about in our PHP for WordPress section, into our index.php file. Now, one of the things we've got to think about here in our index.php file is where to start and stop the loop. Basically, you want to put it around anything that is going to be repeated. Our header, primary area, and main area are not going to be repeated. However, our article section, if we're on a blog listing page, we may have a bunch of articles. So our loop is going to have to start before this article tag and then end before it down here. So you may not remember how to type out the loop by scratch, so let's just talk our way through it. First, we have if have posts. Okay, what that does is check to see if there are any posts on the page. We then have while have posts, and that is going to loop as long as there are posts available. Maybe one time on a page, multiple times on an archive page. And then finally, we have the post, which is going to head and which grabs the data for the actual post so that we could use it in our main area here. Now, outside of this, let's see, after our article ends is where we have to close our while loop. So we'll come down here, end while, and then we also have to put in an if statement or continue our if statement. So we're not going to just close it here with end if. We're going to put an else here. And then down below, we can close it with an end if. Inside of here is where we could put a message if there is no content. And we do want a little bit of this markup here. Let me just grab this much of it. Actually, we're going to duplicate it. Or up here, we'll say 404 with our WP hierarchy. And then down below in the content area is where we could do this again. Let's copy it, be a little bit more efficient. Bring that down, and here is where we will say, sorry, no content found. And that could be easily translated. Okay, so this should be our loop. Basically, we have it starting up here. We've got the article. We'll tab that inside of it, and then our end while and else. So this is going to be everything that comes after it. And since we know that this is going to be a 404, we could actually delete some of that. But on the other hand, it adds some classes like post that might be helpful. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave it in. And then the else, or then the if statement ends completely. So let's take a look at our site. Oh, you know what? We can't take a look yet. We have to do one more thing. What we have here is still hard-coded data, so we don't actually know if this is working yet. And we have to pull in the title tag. So you could do this two ways, and I'll briefly mention the pros and cons to this. You could either put the title tag inside of HTML, so I could put an H1 out here like this, or you could pass it as parameters. So this first parameter is what should appear before it, and this parameter is what appears after it. What are the pros and cons? Now, the pros to this approach is that programmatically, there's a filter we'll look at later where I could say, hey, if I'm on this certain page, change this instead, or throw a link into it. You could do a lot of stuff programmatically. The downside is it's more difficult for someone to figure that out, and it's a little bit more confusing for someone editing your theme who doesn't know that. Now, if you were to add the HTML outside of here, that's easier for someone to recognize, but it would be harder for another plugin or another developer to programmatically make changes to that. So for that reason, we're going to weigh on the side of taking this approach, and then down here, we're going to simply come in and put the content. So now that we've got that filled out, let's come back into our loop and see, or let's come back into our site and see how it's looking. All right, so back on our site, look at what we've got here. We've got the content. I had a homepage assigned as a static homepage, so that's what I'm seeing. My sample page is good. Portfolio, we'll come back to that. We haven't really talked about portfolio yet. That's custom. But these pages here, and some of that is customized. We'll talk about why that is later. And our blog here, which we could click through. No, we can't click through because everything's in H1. So here's where we get to some of the issues of, we come back to our homepage. Look at this. This is great. Static page, looking great. An H1 tag, all good. But then when we get into a loop situation, like on our blog, we can't click on any of these posts, and we don't have excerpts if we wanted. So there are some problems. And this is the point that we made early on, which is that you could have an index.php file control your whole site. It would be possible, but it's not always a good idea, because we're going to obviously have to put a bunch of conditional tags in here and say, oh, if it's this, then do this. And if it's this, then do this. And that's better avoided by breaking things up into templates or into template parts. So what we're going to look at next is a brief way that we can make this loop even cleaner by taking out this whole section here, everything inside of article, and that needs to be indented, and everything inside of this little article section. That looks proper. Okay, so we're going to pull these out into some separate includes and talk about why that is a little bit better approach. So what you've got to do at this point is follow along, add the loop. I know you could copy and paste it, but take the time to actually type it, because you'll learn that it's not that difficult, and having that, I think, in memory can also help with your understanding of what's actually happening. So go ahead and type that out, get the title and the content displaying, get a message displaying if there's no page. And in fact, we didn't test that, so let's just put in a dummy page, 404, no content. Okay, cool, that's working. And then on your own site, so the project that you're building alongside this, do the same thing. Add the loop in finally and get that magic happening, have some different pages and content, and you'll see that it's not the best in every page, but it is pulling in the data that we want. So go ahead and make that accomplishment happen. And then in the next video, we'll talk about how to clean this up a little bit more and start building some small modular files.